we are intentional. I love that, so I wanted to share that with you.
Yes, excellent.
Thank you.
So now we have a conversation with Ernest Holmes. And when Rex and I were at Asilomar a few weeks ago, they gave out this book for everyone who was there. And it is a compilation that was put inside Divine magazine quite a few years ago about imagined conversations with our founder, Ernest Holmes, and different various people of different philosophies and faiths and musicians and artists, even Mary Magdalene and Jesus he talks to. And it's an imaginary conversation that different people wrote about what Ernest would say and what the person would say back to them. And a lot of what you're going to hear was really written, was really spoken and said by those particular people. So I'm going to invite Jess to come on up. He's going to assist me today. And I invite you to use your imagination. I'm Ernest Holmes. Rex said, don't you want to wear a hat or a suit and tie? And, no, you can use your imagination. There's Ernest Holmes up there. Now, those of you that are new to Science of Mind might think, well, who in the heck is he? Well, you're going to find out a little bit more about him through these conversations. And he isn't someone that we idolize at all. And what you're going to find is how he synthesized so many different world religions and philosophies and such. That's what we study here. We don't study Ernest Holmes. We study all the things he brought to us. And that will make sense as we go on. Hi, Ernest. So we're going to start with a conversation with Ken Wilber. It's called Synthesizing Commonalities. Ken Wilber was sometimes called the Einstein of consciousness. You may have heard of him, you may not have. And he's the author of many, many books. And he had a thing called integral philosophy. So here we're imagining a meeting between the two men, Ernest and Ken, both driven to find what unites humanity and spirit. So imagine the setting. This historic meeting between two renowned philosophers taking place late one afternoon in Wilbur's loft overlooking downtown Denver.
So Ernie, your Science of Mind philosophy has certainly touched the lives of many people. How did you go about creating it?
Yes, well, I have always been fascinated by the deeper questions of meaning. I can remember my brother, William, lending me a copy of a book by Ralph Waldo Emerson when I was around 20. And that just set my mind on fire. From there, I went on to read everything I could get my hands on, from philosophy to science to religion. I was simply looking for truth. And I found there was a common thread running through most of the things that spoke to me.
I can really relate, my friend. What happened next?
Well, I began synthesizing these commonalities. Eventually, one person asked me to come speak to his metaphysical discussion group. My ideas were very well received. I began speaking more, and I decided to write down my ideas into books, and evolved the philosophy, and I wrote my complete ideas in The Science of Mind, which I wrote in 1938. How did you come up with your integral philosophy, Ken?
Oh, very similar story. I was in college studying science. I was going to be a doctor. But I found that science wasn't answering my most pressing questions of meaning. That's when I discovered these writers who were bringing together Eastern and Western thought, Krishnamurti, Alan Watts, and others. They just flipped my world. I read everything I could find, both in the Eastern traditions as well as Western thought, psychotherapy, and the like. And the more I read, the more I found myself confused because they disagreed with one another.
Well, the wisest thinkers and writers can seem to be at odds. So what led you to bring them together?
Well, it hit me that all these smart people couldn't be totally wrong. That's when I realized that all of them, from Zen Buddhism to psychoanalysis, contained some partial truths. They were only true for addressing different types of consciousness. That led to my first book, The Spectrum of Consciousness. From there, I continued integrating different truths and growing my integral model.
I believe there are no finalities in any science, philosophy, or religion. I always stressed that we should be open at the top to change and adapt as we discover new truths and ideas.
Yes. If you were updating science of mind now, what would be some of these new ideas you would incorporate?
I've often thought that I could have stressed the importance of love more in the textbook. Love is such an important part of our spiritual path, isn't it? I also really resonated with the ideas of Sri Aurobindo, his spiritual evolutionary outlook and his integral yoga. You know, for a time, I was reading his wonderful book, The Divine Life, once a year.
Well, just so you know, Aurobindo was a major influence on my integral development as well.
So maybe it's not so much about my rewriting the science of mind as it is for those who study it to be open to the idea of these other teachers and incorporate those ideas into their path in their own way. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ernest.
Come Together Over Me, a conversation with John Lennon. Imagine that. In this powerful conversation, Dr. Ernest Holmes and John Lennon, two thought-provoking creative individuals who believe deeply in the intrinsic value of positive thought and its profound effects on peace and happiness, come together to help us make sense of a complicated world. Now, I must say that most of this that John Lennon's going to read are actually from him. Hi, John. I've always appreciated your music and your idealism, especially in All You Need Is Love and Imagine, that song, where you crystallize your vision for world peace. Both songs echo Science of Mind teachings because we believe love is within us. It cannot be destroyed. It can be ignored. To the extent that we abandon love, we will feel it has abandoned us. Denying love is our only problem, and embracing it is our only answer. Through the power of love, we can let go of past history and begin again. Love heals, forgives, and makes us whole.
And I appreciate you, because I know you, like me, are a dreamer. You understand heaven and hell are states of mind, and you too imagine that if we all joined together and lived life fully, we could live in this world as one. If we could just get people to understand that there are two basic motivating factors, fear and love. When we are afraid, we will pull back from life. When we are in love, we are open to all that life has to offer with passion, excitement, and acceptance. We need to learn to love ourselves first, in all our glory and our imperfections. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or our potential to create. Evolution and all hopes for a better world rest in the fearlessness of open-hearted vision of people who embrace life.
Yes, John. Loving yourself is the golden thread of truth found in all faith paths, and it is our collective mission as ministers, artists, and individuals to spread. True imagination is not fanciful daydreaming. It's fire from heaven. Life is not just something to be endured. It's to be lived in joy and a fullness without limit.
When I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote down, happy. They told me I didn't understand the assignment. And I told them they didn't understand life.
Oh, John, your mother was correct. To understand life, you must understand you belong to the universe in which you live. You are one with the creative genius back of this vast array of ceaseless motion, this original flow of life. You are as much a part of it as the sun, the earth, and the air. There's something in you telling you this, like a voice echoing from some mountaintop of inward vision.
And we all must believe that inward vision. Things aren't out of our control. I still believe in love, peace. I still believe in positive thinking. While there's life, there's hope.
Yes, John, thank you. The next conversation is with His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, this imagined conversation. It's called Awakening Humanity to Our Challenges. If Dr. Ernest Holmes had a brief conversation with the Dalai Lama, His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, it might go something like this. And again, there are many direct quotes that are in this conversation. Your Holiness, I have long admired Buddhism, especially for its deep examination of the mind and the power of thought. In Science of Mind, we help people understand the limitless potential within them, and this starts by working constructively in mind.
Thank you, and I agree. The Buddha proclaimed, all that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make our world.
Yes, and it seems most essential to dissolve thoughts of separation and to build up an awareness of oneness. The power in all religions is in the spiritual principles involved and in our conscious unity with those principles. We are actually members of everyone's religion. Buddhist, Confucian, Muslim, Jew, Christian, even pagan, all partake of the same divine life. Each has his road to good, to the divine that is latent within everyone.
This is a most powerful approach. For years, I have sought to awaken humanity to the critical challenges we face. Erosion of the Earth's ecology, education for all, the gap between rich and poor, reviving practices of nonviolence, and harmony among religions. Moreover, we must teach and practice compassion. We can reject everything else. Religion, ideology, all receive wisdom. But we cannot escape the necessity of love and compassion. This, then, is my true religion, my simple faith. Open our heart, our own mind, is the temple. The doctrine is compassion.
So true. We are on the verge of a great spiritual awakening. The world is undergoing the death throes of an old order and the travail of a new birth. And whether or not it remains suspended in a state of indeterminate coma or passes immediately into the heaven of divine promise will depend entirely upon how many of its ancient corpses it is willing to lose. It is as certain as that the laws of nature are immutable, that someday the world will be reborn, resurrected into a consciousness of unity, cooperation, love, and collective security.
May we honor one another deeply and do this great work together.
Yes. Thank you, Dalai Lama. There'll be a test at the end of this. Our last conversation is with Jean Houston, called Awakening to Your Spiritual Magnificence. So Jean Houston is a great luminary, still living, and this is an imaginary conversation, and most of it is, again, directly from her. And there's an editor's note here that Jean Houston shared. When she was 9 years old, she says, my mother took me to listen to one of Ernest Holmes' sermons when she was 9. And afterwards, I shook hands with that fine gentleman who, as I recall, was quite merry. M-E-R-R-Y. He was quite merry. I thought that was cute. Jean, I understand you wrote the foreword to our most recent publication of The Science of Mind. I have an extraordinary respect for you and the way you embody the principles of our work. I love the way you capture the essence of our teaching. The highest God and the innermost God is one God. This captures not only the essence, but the practice of oneness. As I stated in The Science of Mind, God's creative power of mind is right here. And we have as much of this power to use as we believe in and embody.
It was a privilege to write the foreword for the Science of Mind text. It is perhaps one of the most potent and influential books of the 20th century. Its words have inspired countless millions, heeded the growth of spiritually innovative churches and philosophies. Yet, no university places it in its curriculum. Perhaps this is as it should be, for it is in the hidden masterpiece which must be discovered only when one is ready to enter upon the larger life.
I could not have said that better myself, Jean. I'm grateful and pleased that so many people are awakening to their spiritual magnificence. Do keep up the good work. And remember, within us is the unborn possibility of limitless experience. Ours is the privilege of giving birth to it.
Thanks for the encouraging words. I am reminded of this quote from Sir Isaac Newton. If I have seen further than others, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants. Now, Ernest, if I may, I'd like to read a little letter that I wrote to you also. May I do that?
Yes, please.
Dear Ernest, you are one of those giants upon whose shoulders we all stand. As I say in my book, The Wizard of Us, the time has come for each of us to dare enter the inner sanctum of our own power, to stroll defiantly past the smoke and mirrors in order to pull back the curtain and see who is really pulling all the controls. We are creating it all. For the true wizard is us. Remember the if I only in The Wizard of Oz? If I only had a brain, some courage, a heart. Instead of if I only, we find ourselves on the yellow brick road with our faithful allies, representations of mind, heart, and courage. Ernest, we are on one of our greatest journeys. These are the times, we are the people, and we now stand on the shoulders of spirit, creating a world that works for everyone.
Thank you, Jean. I love that. We are on one of our greatest journeys. These are the times. We are the people, and we now stand on the shoulders of spirit, creating a world that works for everyone. Are you in? Thank you, Jean. Thank you, everyone. So these conversations, I think, are a great way to clarify why we come here, why we study this philosophy, and I hope that answered some of your questions. And does anyone have any questions that you would like to ask about what you just heard, or you want to save it for gold nuggets is fine as well. But are there any burning questions? I'm happy to try to answer. You just raise your hand if you have any questions. Amada.
Are there any other conversations, or was that the entire?
No, there are a lot of them.
Okay, and it's called
Conversations with Ernest.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, like I said, he talks to Mary Magdalene, Jesus, all kinds of people. Florence Scovel Shinn. He talks to a dog with a beagle, Billy the Beagle or something. Anyway, there's a lot of them. Pope Francis. Mozart, he talks to Mozart. That's a really great one. Yes.
So they aren't real conversations.
They're imaginary.
They're imagined.
Right. So someone took it upon themselves to pull different ideas from the philosophy of what we teach and the philosophy of that person, and they put them together in a short conversation. It's all imaginary, yes. But like I said, many of the things that are spoken or read when you get the book were really said by that person. So they were pulled from their books. So it wasn't all made up. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed that.
Yes.